Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the true story of love, crime, and death behind America's most infamous outlaw couple during the Great Depression. I'm absolutely thrilled to guide you through this, because honestly, the real history we're about to look at is way more fascinating than the myths you've probably heard. We're going to separate the Hollywood fiction from the gritty, historical facts, and really dive into how a desperate, poverty-stricken era birthed America's most wanted couple. You know, the 1930s were a time of immense struggle, and against that intense backdrop, two young people carved out a bloody legacy that literally still captures our attention today.
Would you rather die together than live apart? I mean, imagine falling in love with someone so deeply that you would actually choose death over separation? Okay, let's dive into this fascinating contrast between the romantic legend and the violent reality. During the absolute darkest, most desperate years of the Great Depression, everyday people were watching their banks collapse and their life savings just vanish overnight. And because of this widespread misery, there was massive resentment toward authority. So when this young couple started robbing banks, stealing cars, and escaping these seemingly impossible situations, they found a strangely receptive audience. To some folks living through those hard times, they were these rebellious Robin Hood figures fighting back against a completely broken system. But to others, they were simply ruthless killers leaving a devastating trail of violence across the country. As we'll see, the truth is actually a lot more complicated than either of those extremes.
Section 1. Two Paths Collide. Before they became a legendary duo, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrett were just two Texans with entirely different trajectories. To really understand the explosive combination they became, we need to look at where they came from. Over on the left side, we have Bonnie. Born in Texas in 1910, her friends described her as intelligent, charming, and fiercely full of life. She was an honor student. She loved writing poetry and kept a diary filled with dreams of making it big in Hollywood. She actually got married at just 16, desperately hoping for a happy future. But when that marriage quickly failed and her husband ended up in jail, she was left working as a waitress, just searching for a fresh start. Now look over at the right side, Clyde. He grew up in a profoundly poor farming family where money was always tight. He started stealing cars and cracking safes as a teenager, which inevitably landed him in a notorious Texas prison farm. Historians note that the relentless brutality he faced behind bars completely hardened him. Actually, to get out of the grueling labor, he had another inmate chop off two of his toes with an axe. Yeah, you heard that right. When he finally got out, he made a chilling promise. He would never return to prison alive. So, their paths finally merge in January 1930. They meet through a mutual friend and spend hours that very first night talking, laughing, and dreaming about a better life. The connection was just instantaneous and incredibly intense. But just months later, Clyde's past catches up with him and he's arrested again. And this is where Bonnie's fierce, unquestioning loyalty really first shows itself. Risking her own freedom, she secretly smuggles a gun into the jail so Clyde can attempt an escape. I mean, that was a massive gamble that showed she was all in. Even though Clyde was captured again shortly after in Ohio, their bond was permanently cemented. They truly believed they belonged together, no matter the cost. By the time Clyde was paroled and released in 1932, their deadly cross-country crime spree officially kicked off.
Section 2. America's Most Wanted. Following Clyde's release, the couple formed the Barrow Gang alongside Clyde's brother Buck, his wife Blanche, and a few others.
Now, we always see the Hollywood myth on the left, right? These mastermind outlaws hitting massive, heavily guarded banks and walking away with absolute fortunes. But the historical reality on the right, it was far less glamorous. They actually targeted rural gas stations, local grocery stores, and small-town businesses where security was at its weakest. On a typical robbery, they weren't stealing thousands of dollars. They were often walking away with just a few bucks, literally barely enough to buy food and gas for the next day. They only survived by constantly driving, hopping across state lines where local police jurisdictions ended. It made it incredibly difficult for law enforcement to coordinate and catch them. And despite those extremely small payouts, every single robbery made the local papers, and a deeply divided public was watching their every single move.
Smiling, posing with guns, and joking together. You know, the gang was getting increasingly violent at this point, and desperate shootouts were becoming common. Several law enforcement officers and innocent civilians tragically lost their lives. Yet somehow, they still managed to become these rebellious national celebrities. The real turning point came in 1933. They made a hasty escape from a police raid on their hideout in Joplin, Missouri. And in their rush, they left behind rolls of undeveloped film. When police developed the photos, they didn't find the menacing monsters they expected. They found the couple smiling, posing playfully with guns, and just joking around. One famous photo showed Bonnie jokingly posing with a cigar in her mouth and a pistol in her hand. Well, the press took it as hard fact, painting her as this hardened, cigar-smoking gun moll. And the public? They absolutely ate it up. People were buying newspapers just to get the latest updates, fully buying into the legend of the untouchable outlaw couple.
Section 3. The harsh reality. But here's the thing. The public's fascination with their defiance against the system completely masked the miserable, terrifying reality of their daily existence.
Those smiling photos we just talked about, they were nothing more than a carefully curated facade. Living as fugitives was far from some romantic adventure. Their days were actually filled with exhaustion, paranoia, and agony. They slept in stolen cars, abandoned buildings, and lonely forests. They rarely stayed in one place for more than a few days. They couldn't trust anyone, because every stranger could be a paid informant, and every passing police car could mean a fatal shootout. The reality became unbearably dark after a terrible car accident. Clyde missed a detour sign and flipped their vehicle into a dry riverbed. Boiling battery acid poured over Bonnie's right leg, causing severe third-degree burns that literally burned right down to the bone. From that day on, she could barely walk and often had to be carried by Clyde. But despite this immense, constant pain, and even though friends later noted that Bonnie knew their future was entirely hopeless, she completely refused to leave him.
Section 4. The Final Trap and Legacy. By 1934, authorities decided this bloody cross-country chase had gone on long enough. They brought in former Texas Ranger Frank Hammer to hunt them down.
Look at how methodical Hammer's approach was. He didn't just chase them, he completely outsmarted them. Step 1, he stopped the endless chaotic pursuit across state lines. Step 2, he systematically mapped their exact routes and studied their driving habits. He realized they actually moved in a predictable loop to visit the handful of family members and friends they still trusted. Step 3, he tracked down the family of a gang member named Henry Methvin in Louisiana. And finally, Step 4, leveraging a pardon for Methvin, Hammer orchestrated an ambush. He used all this deeply researched intelligence to set a trap on a secluded road, a trap from which there would be absolutely no escape.
May 23, 1934, a rural road near Beanville Parish, Louisiana. Early that morning, the couple drove their stolen Ford V8 right down that road. Hamer and his heavily armed posse had been hiding in the brush all night, knowing the couple was scheduled to pass that way to meet Methvin's father, who was parked on the shoulder as a decoy. When Clyde slowed down to help, officers opened fire without warning. And guys, it wasn't just a shootout, it was an overwhelming barrage. The posse unleashed over 130 rounds of ammunition into the vehicle in mere seconds, utterly shredding the car and everyone inside before Bonnie or Clyde could even fire a single shot.
25. When the smoke finally cleared and the deafening gunfire ceased, the silence was absolute. Clyde died at exactly 25 years old, alongside 23-year-old Bonnie. In that chaotic hail of lead, their violent journey came to a sudden, permanent stop. Looking back, it's startling to realize just how incredibly young they were when it all ended. But Clyde had fulfilled his ultimate, chilling promise. He never returned to prison alive, choosing instead to die on a dusty road next to the only person he trusted.
Almost instantly, a massive, morbid media circus erupted around their deaths. News of the ambush spread across America within hours. Thousands of curious people actually rushed to the small Louisiana town to see the bullet-riddled car. The frenzy was so intense that souvenir hunters were literally trying to cut off locks of Bonnie's hair and pieces of Clyde's blood-soaked clothing right at the scene. The vehicle itself became a traveling attraction for years. Newspapers printed dramatic, sensational headlines everywhere. And through movies, books, and songs, especially that highly influential 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, their bloody saga was immortalized in American pop culture for nearly a century.
So, heroes or violent criminals? As we conclude this explainer, we are left to impartially look at the facts and ask ourselves, were they desperate, star-crossed victims of a broken society or just ruthless killers who got exactly what they bargained for? When fame relies on blood, who is really to blame? The criminals who pulled a trigger or the public that eagerly cheers them on? It's a powerful reminder that fame often hides a much darker reality, a romance built on desperation and violence that could only ever end in death. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible piece of history with me today.